Hi, Wayne Doorband here for the biweekly NTP Seed webinar huddle that we hold here at our Northern Colorado headquarters in Loveland, Colorado, both live here at our site and also going out over the web to those of you that are watching. Enjoy what we have for you today. Hi, Wayne Doorband here from Northern Colorado for our biweekly huddle, the Economics in Action biweekly huddle that we do. Gosh, we're coming up on a year and a half almost, a year and 3/4 of this next revised version. We did these back in 2011, 2012. We took a couple-year break, and now we've been doing them again for 18, 19 months. And it is just exciting every time we do them. We've got Cheryl Coates with us today, who's going to talk about tiny homes and about their business. It's going to be a lot of fun. Again, 2 weeks from now, we'll be having our next one. Today is April Fool's, and I will hopefully not make a fool of myself as we do this. And no joke, we will have another one in 2 weeks. So we've got Elizabeth, and I don't know her last name, but she's working on an incredible sustainable project over in Africa. And we're going to talk about that and talk with her about what she's doing. And so that'll be 2 weeks from now. I'm going to say, as I always do, go back and listen to the replays. We post all of these on YouTube. We post them on our websites, so you can go to the Nourish the Planet site, the Economics site. I think, Brian, probably a bunch of different places we've got those up. We've always got a live audience with us. We've got a couple other people here in our studio. Brian's here. Brian does all of our editing, and he gets a chance to sort of listen to this. And so we're excited. So, Cheryl, how are you doing today?
I'm doing just fine, thank you.
Awesome. And so we'll go start with Cheryl in just a second. And again, please put questions online. Mark, I see you out there, and Mark has said hi all. If you have any video or audio problems, just put it in the chat area for us. We'll try to get to your questions either while we're doing the talk here or after. We'll make sure we get to everything. And I think that's about it. We enjoy doing this. It's been great fun. I've gotten to meet lots of really neat people and do interviews with them. Usually what comes out of it is kind of a relationship that we work on for time afterwards. So, Cheryl, again, great to have you here today. Why don't you just tell the audience about yourself and your business a little bit, and let's get started with that.
Well, my name is Cheryl Coates, and I've done a lot of things in life. And currently, my husband and I are building tiny houses. I started off as a nurse for 30 years and went back to school and actually became a paralegal for a while. Didn't like so much the fighting in the courtroom, so I found another career, and that was flute performance. But finally, I kind of settled down, and my husband and I have been building tiny houses now for 3 years. We bring into tiny homes over 37 years of residential construction, and that is the main point, is that tiny homes are complicated. They are under extreme structural stresses when they're on the road, and our key components are to keep them safe and not have anybody be injured while they're being towed or when they're on a foundation, either direction.
And as you were describing your background a little bit, there was a one piece right at the end that our sound wasn't the best on. And I probably heard this wrong, but I thought maybe you said you did something related to flute. I don't think that was right. At the very end.
It was right, actually.
It was? Okay.
Performance on flute.
Okay.
I've been playing since I was very young and have continued to play.
Wow, that's really neat. And then the other parts of your career before, I would guess there's been a family maybe involved in that equation. I know I heard that your son was helping you with some of the computer setup that you were doing for this. Maybe tell us a little bit about the family situation.
I have 4 sons. They range from 32 to 21 now. And so I've been blessed with 4 grandchildren on top of all that. My oldest son, actually all of my sons have helped in the construction along the way. Unfortunately, we just haven't been able to have them work full time, and that's what's been hard. And so they come in and build whenever they can and whenever we need them. The middle 2 have returned from the Marine Corps. They were both overseas, and the older one was in Afghanistan, and they're home. So one of our goals we wanted as a company is actually to help veterans transition back to civilian life. It seems like they come back from being in the service and they're lost and don't really have a feel of where to go quite yet. And we see kind of a hole there. That's another company goal, but that's down the road once we get really established.
Well, what a wonderful goal, and please tell your two sons both thank you from, I'm sure, all of us related to their service. That's important. Well, it's very nice that you have the option down the road to get them involved, and they're able to work at least part-time now. By the way, you don't look nearly old enough to have sons that age, so there's something wrong with the equation here, or a good thing on your side. Anyway, so when did you started your business 3 years ago? I think you told me one time when we were talking that you personally enjoy the I'll just call it the marketing side of things. And so tell us what you're working with on your side of it. Are you getting in there and hammering nails and such and doing construction also, or is your role mainly on the business and marketing and sales side?
I'm on every side. This last one, we're actually sitting in our 4th house that we just finished in the last 2 weeks. The Denver Home Show was last weekend, well, almost last weekend, a little bit longer than that, and we had to build this house within 5 weeks to get it ready for the show. I can still tell you exactly where I dripped a little bit of polyurethane on the floor and exactly where every pencil mark was before it was sawed. And we didn't even get the countertop until 9 a.m. the morning that the show started. There was a little bit of heart throbbing there and wondering if everything was going to fall into place. I play a big part of the tiny house. I design the kitchen, the bathroom layout, I do all the purchasing for all the appliances. I have to have everything ready to go before we start construction. And then on the business side, on the marketing and stuff, I've had to learn how to do a website, how to be present on Facebook, how to talk to people, how to make them interested. And not just interested, I think the most thing that I do is the educational background, that I try to give our customers enough information that they can make informed choices. You're looking kind of puzzled. Informed choices.
No, it was actually looking at something on the screen, and good observation though.
It wasn't a bug. Anyway, a lot of times people come into the tiny house and just have never been in a tiny house before, and there's little things that we do to make them safer, especially on the road. Starting with even just the roof. It needs to be a solid steel roof. If you can imagine a tiny house going down the road and you've got hurricane force winds because you're going 65 miles an hour.
Cheryl may have frozen up here. Our experience is usually she'll come back here in a second, but just to let everybody know, right now it appears we're in a little bit of a frozen status, and we'll see what happens here in a minute.
On the computer.
Okay, so Cheryl, we have got now your voice. Our audience won't be able to see you, but they were able to catch views in the first place. So why don't you just talk a little bit just to make sure Deb's listening and seeing the sound, hearing the sound okay.
Hi, I'm back again, just not visually.
Well, that's. Are you hearing that okay, Deb? All right. So it sounds like our volume's great. And anyway, I think when we last left, you were talking about again everything that you do with the business, and I think that maybe if you want, you can wrap that up. You had said just broadly how involved you were in all kinds of aspects, and I think the last thing you talked about was appliances. that you were having to help make decisions on before they go in, and about the safety factors and so on.
Right. Every appliance that we use in our tiny houses are used for a very specific reason and end result. We were one of the first actually to introduce a tankless hot water heater on demand so that people can shower for as long as they can, but also don't have, or they're not wasting the energy heating the water all the time. And that to us is one of the most important things, is not to use energy that isn't necessary.
Right.
So a little bit more for on demand in cost, but in the long run, it's worth it.
Super. So I noticed, and I didn't see it at first, but that you're actually sitting in, it looks to me like one of your tiny homes. Was that the one that you brought with you to the home show? And
it sure is.
And because our audience was able to see that and probably remember a little bit of it. As a matter of fact, it looks a lot like what Deb's showing on the screen here. There was a stairway going up to behind you to your left, I think, or maybe to your right. So tell us just a little bit about where you're sitting, how that looks, and such.
Our tiny house is, if you look behind me on the right, let's see, my right, as I'm facing the screen, is our ladder. Our ladders, we really do a lot of different things with our ladders, and this one's just our basic one. It depends on the age group and the need of each individual when we plan their house. You know, some of us can climb ladders easily, and then there's people like me who say, I ran too many marathons, and my back just won't quite let me climb a ladder anymore. And so that's when I really encourage the things like Murphy beds on the end wall. But behind us, even the countertop, it may seem weird, but when you're planning a tiny house, you have to think of what is the lightest material, the most flexible material, and one that will last for as long as possible. And that's one of the reasons why we've chosen Corian for our countertops. It may be more expensive than granite, but in the longevity of the use of the product, it's repairable, it won't crack on the road, and it's lightweight. The same thing with walls in our house. You'll notice there's a lot of tongue and groove. When you put tongue and groove up, these are single planks of wood that we cut to size, and then we pound with one of the mallets with the soft end up into place and shoot nails across. Each one of the boards that you see on our walls have been individually placed up there and cut to size so they fit tight. This way, when the house goes down the road, the walls give back and forth as it goes down the road, so that it's not a solid surface that will crack and crumble like drywall will.
Makes a lot of sense. So just ballpark, and I know you say they're all customized, but your unit that would be typical of the four you've constructed to this point, what would be a ballpark price for a consumer for that?
We start at $53,000 and go up to $63,000, and that's for the 30-foot. What we've run into is the importance of a quality trailer. We couldn't find one anywhere out there that was exactly what we wanted to do, and had to actually design and do the engineering on our own trailers. And that is really where the most important piece, and probably the most expensive part of our houses, is the trailer. You want to make sure that it can handle the capacity of the house, the weight. A lot of these trailers out there, houses weigh more than people think. And if you don't have an actual capacity that can carry the house properly, you might as well forget even towing it. And the next step we took is to have steel to the full width of the trailer, which is 105 inches or 8'5" about. And on top of that, we have steel out there. And then we put big bolts all the way around the perimeter through the steel up to the bottom plate of the house attaching the house to the trailer permanently so that we don't lose it as it's going down the road.
Awesome. And so do you have financing programs, or if people are going to buy, do they go to their own lenders, or have you been able to attract any money in that way from a financing perspective?
We're getting there. This has been a really hard one for, I believe, most tiny house builders. One of the reasons why financing is so difficult is there are no set minimum standards to build by, which means that anybody out there can go out, regardless if they have built anything in their lives, can build a tiny house and then put it on the market and sell it. Now, when they do that, there's nothing to say that it met any minimum standards, for example, the International Residential Code or RV standards. It's quality control. It is also something that helps compare one house to another so that we can set values for houses. If your dentist built a house and the builder built a house, how do you compare the value of the two houses? It's really difficult, and that's the problem right there.
Makes sense. So let's transition a little bit away from the houses and the business and talk a little bit more about you and your background. That's one of the things our listeners always love to hear about. And I sent you some questions, and so I won't go through them in order, but just kind of go through a little bit of a list here.
Okay.
Tell me about some event that happened when you were a child, when you were young, that you even still think about today that really molded your life. It could have been something positive, it could have been something negative, just something that happened that still today you know has had influence on your life.
You know, I think the one that really had an impact was my father was a biologist and chemist, and we moved from Colorado to Windsor, Ontario to be part of the International Joint Commission, which was a commission between Canada and the U.S. in cleaning up the Great Lakes water pollution back in the 70s. And my father was the senior scientist in charge of that for the U.S., and I found out that Canada really is a whole different country. I struggled. You know, when you go to another country, especially one on the same continent, you think, oh, that's just outlying America. But when you don't know your provinces and your prime ministers and you don't speak the right French or even like geology, that was a real class there. It makes going on to college more difficult. But they had so much, you know, there were some really neat advantages to living in Canada. They had some unique cultural, I can't even say it quite right, cultural things that Colorado didn't have, or as the America, and that was music. Music was really a big deal up there, and I got to play my flute in many places I would never have gotten to.
Very cool. Let's stay on that one for a minute. When did you start playing flute? How old were you? And what was the motivation? What got you interested in that?
Let's see. I started playing flute at age 9. My mother was a wonderful, great violinist. And I grew up listening to music, and I always wanted to participate. Unfortunately, she wouldn't let us play her instrument because she didn't want us to compare. But growing up, I went to every rehearsal, every light opera, everything there ever was that my mom played in. And eventually, the joy of it was when I was 17, 18, I actually got to play in the same symphony, in the Windsor Symphony, as a substitute on my flute. And music has been part of me. It still is.
Very, very cool. Staying back in that childhood time, and then this really relates to even today, put yourself back to being around 15 years old, and it's a Saturday afternoon, and it's beautiful outside, just like it's been here the last couple of days. You don't have any other things you have to be doing, and so you can do whatever you'd like. Again, considering where you lived and what would we find you doing on a Saturday afternoon?
You'd see me riding a horse.
Okay.
My girlfriends growing up in Colorado, they always had horses, and we were allowed to do something different we don't allow our kids to do today. Our parents used to drop us off up by Buffalo Creek, Indian Creek, close to Sedalia, and they would drop us off for 2 weeks at a time. And as a young teenager, we stayed up there by ourselves.
Yeah, you don't see that. You don't see that too much today. That's for sure.
And nothing ever happened. I mean, we rode horses till we were black and blue.
Yeah, I remember vividly when I was growing up that I had an older cousin who was like 10 years older than me, and we would go camping. So my parents and my cousin's parents, so my uncle and aunt, we'd go camping, and many weekends where we'd leave on a Friday afternoon after the parents were done with work, and we'd get up to wherever we were going to be camping, still on Friday night, and my cousin would take off. I mean, I'm remembering this when I was anywhere from 6 years old up to 10. You know, he was a little older, but he'd just go, and the word was you have to be back by the time we're ready to leave on Sunday, and he would come back Sunday afternoon, and that was all we'd see him. And again, you'd never think of doing that today, but he was there were never any incidents. He became a deputy sheriff in Mono County in California, which is where all the ski areas, Mammoth Mountain and other places are at. But more importantly, he was on the search and rescue department for Yosemite National Park and for all the areas around there where people get into difficulties when they're hiking or climbing or other sorts of things. And obviously that independence and such that he had as a youth was something that served him well in that sort of role. So we'd find you riding your horse and at times maybe out and about for a couple of weeks. Really cool. I don't know that parents should learn from that today, but maybe it'd be good if we went back and did things a little more that way. So what was a person now let's take you a little bit older, but let's say post high school but still young adult ages, someone other than one of your parents who had a real significant impact on your life then, and maybe you would even still say now. And maybe even you didn't realize it then, but certainly you would say now that this person was really important. And the name isn't so important, but just sort of why. Tell us about the person and what it was that they did.
Well, that's a hard one. Looking back, I've had one close friend that has become more and more part of my life. Back then, we may have ridden horses together, but we met back when she and I were in 5th grade. And today, she has taught me what women can do and how they can travel and to reach for the stars and just not give up. We did a lot of adventure racing together and mountain biking, and I had to learn to dig really deep at times to reach for things. And she always had the faith in me, no matter how bad or how deep the hole was, that I could climb up that and make it out and get where I had to go and keep working towards something new and better. And even today, we still talk.
Very cool. And again, that's the kind of things that all of us, and I'm sure everybody listening, can be able to learn from, because we all have people like that in our lives, and maybe we should all say thank you to them a little bit more than we do. What about, again, you talked about playing the flute, obviously. Can you remember again, maybe in your early adulthood, or maybe even later, something really negative that happened that at the time you thought was just horrible, and now you look back and realize, yeah, it wasn't so good, but it really did have, over time, it had a real positive impact on you and your life, and you could clearly say that still today.
You know, there have been times, many times in my life, that I had to stop doing things and change courses. And usually it seemed like there was negatives. Even, sorry, I got distracted. You know, I tried to go back to school a couple of years ago, and I wanted to be a performance major on flute and get into music therapy and help people through music. But one of the things that I found out after struggling through, it's called ear training. You're supposed to be able to hear so many notes at once and tell what notes they are and where it's going. I discovered very quickly that I just couldn't hear well enough. And there was never going to be any way I could ever pass that class and move forward. And it was that time that my husband and I had to really pause and think, what's the next step for us in our lives? And that's when we started building tiny houses. And even though I had again looked at a different career, I'm finding so much joy in sharing with people the nuances that make living on a day-to-day basis without so many things in our lives. Or I'm working on getting rid of my stuff, which will take ages. It's a process. It's not an event. I keep telling myself that. But when you have 4 sewing machines because you like to sew, that you can't really justify the fact that you have 4 sewing machines. It really is a process, and that we're all in it together, and we really don't need all the little things we think we do.
That's great. Let's go back. Let's stay a little more in the houses, a little bit also with a recent event, the home show. And you talked about how all that last-minute prep that you did. Give us a highlight that occurred, either somebody you visited with, or just generally about the home show, and how that's going to help you as you begin to think about your next marketing efforts and such for tiny homes, for your business.
I think the highlight was the fact that we had 9 people in the bathroom, 3 in the shower. We didn't know what they were doing in there, but there were 3 in the shower, and 8 in our kitchen, and there were about 15 in the living area. And then I heard a squeal upstairs, and there was a young child up there, but nobody in the whole place. That child didn't belong to any of them. I'm not kidding. A few minutes later, a mom says, "Is there a child in there?" I said, "Well, there's lots of children in here, but hopefully that one up there is yours." And that was probably the high point, is that living tiny doesn't mean living small and not living functionally, that people can move in the space if it's developed right. And it really, we had that many people in it. It was amazing. And then we had 40 waiting outside to get in. And we literally could switch the 40 that were outside, and bring the other 40 in. And I really believe tiny houses are the wave of the future. And they'll happen. It's just going to take a little time to get everybody used to them.
And were you the only tiny house exhibitor there at the home show?
There were actually 7 tiny houses, I believe, there, and 3, let's see, 1, 2, 4 builders, 4 different builders.
Okay. And all from right here in the area, or did any of them come in from a further distance?
I believe one company came in from Utah.
Okay.
Another from Lyons. Another one, the other one was from Colorado. Most of them had not weren't a hands-on builder at their houses. Their team was bigger than ours.
Okay.
My husband and I are just so hands-on that we played a real big role in every moment of the house.
You talked about how you were surprised that you couldn't find trailers that would work. You had to come up with your own. That's obviously a challenge. What other maybe 2 or 3 challenges? Deb's showing a picture now. I don't know whether it's from the home show or another event, but where people are in line to go into one of your homes that's on the exhibit. But what other challenges that you just didn't expect as it related to the construction of the tiny homes that you can remember and think of?
The cabinetry has been a really difficult one, believe it or not, because you have to have a certain number of inches between the floor and the ceiling in the kitchen to use commercial cabinetry that go from the floor to the ceiling.
Okay.
You have to have 80 inches, and so I've actually ended up with one of the companies that you end up putting everything together forever, piece by piece, just to get it to work. It's hard when you're trying to do a combination of an RV setup and a traditional setup of appliances.
Right.
For example, the refrigerator that we put in ours, there's only one that has 24 inches deep. Most of them are 30 inches deep. It's those little details that are really hard to find. It makes it difficult.
Makes sense. So again, transition back to personal side a little bit. Tell us about a book or an article or anything that you've read recently that has some kind of an impact on you today. So what's a book or a really good article or something that you've read that our audience could know about?
I'm glad you said article. Lately, I used to be a big bookworm, and you can find books all over our house, and you still can. But suddenly, I don't know what it is, I'm finding it harder to find time just to enjoy a book. I'm finding that I still have a very creative side in me, and so I've been reading about creating multimedia artworks with fabric. So I've been sitting up there sewing all sorts of things that are tiny house related and with fabric. It's just a new, what do you call it, canvas.
Sure, a new platform for your art.
Exactly. So if you see pillows and things, those are all my artwork.
All right. And Deb's showing, again, she's scrolling through the different pictures here for us. What about, again, on something that's influenced you in your life, how about a quote or you don't have to get it exactly, but something that you remember that you think about every once in a while or a lot that comes from anywhere, either a famous person or somebody that we've never heard of?
You know, I have so many of those little quotes going through my head that I don't think it's anyone in particular, whether it came from support groups, whether it came from anywhere. I think the most important one that keeps hitting me, and I'm not sure who first said it, was remember not to keep one foot in yesterday, and if you have one foot in yesterday and the other foot in tomorrow, what happens with today?
Okay. All right.
And that's how I live my life. If I'm too busy thinking about the past or too busy thinking about the future, I feel like I could lose today. And sometimes it just takes a moment to take your shoes and socks off and feel the ground under your feet and realize today is what really matters.
Wow, that's really good. Thank you for that. I know our audience will enjoy that. So now let's talk about a little bit more of the green side, the sustainability side of tiny homes, or even just what that means to you. I always ask every one of our guests, what does the word sustainable mean to you, and how it relates to what you do with your business?
Oh, sounds like you ask the same kind of questions that I ask customers. I'm continuously asking, what does off-grid mean to you?
Okay.
But in some ways, sustainability to me means that we can maintain the resources we have and replenish them with what we have. In other words, instead of wiping out all of our water, that we use it in a proper way that it becomes replenished through the whole cycle. Just like heating your house, I saw a really neat thing on the internet. It was actually a way to heat your house with 7 cubic yards of manure. And it was compacted in a circle, kind of a circular pattern, and they used water tubing going through the manure, and the manure gave off enough heat to heat the water to 150 degrees. And that water went into the house, so they had like hot water heat, and that manure would sustain the heat for up to 17 months. So it's another way of sustaining our resources. We're using them in a different manner, but we're still using them, and they can become something else after that. Once it's given off its heat, it becomes a great fertilizer for our yard, and it starts the whole cycle over again.
Yeah, that's, and I'm sitting here thinking I have a lot more than 7 cubic yards of manure that I ought to be using for that purpose. And you're right, you're exactly right. It will work, and I know of many people who have used that as a heat source. That's awesome. Let's stay on sort of the theme of things that impact you. Can you think of a technology, and maybe you've even already answered this as it relates to some things, but some kind of a technology that you've fairly recently learned about, let's say over the last couple of years, that you really use a lot today and you would recommend it to others to use?
Oh boy. Now that one you kind of caught me off guard.
So no, I'll give you more hints, because you've already talked about in your art side you're doing things with a new platform that you're developing, but you know, and you talked about websites that you're having to develop. You know, anything, it could be building related, it could be computer related, you name it. Just because our listeners, almost every time we've done this, people have come up with something that I've never heard of, and I learned from it for sure. And then I know our listeners would love to hear about those kinds of things also.
Oh my goodness. You know, computers to me are just still a new technology. I think I'm struggling. I know I just bought a smartphone, and I'm still at a loss of what a smartphone is, and maybe it's showing my age.
So maybe a year from now, and I just thought of one you said earlier. You said a tankless hot water heater for your tiny homes. So, you know, there's an example, for example, of something. So think about that one for a little bit. We've got a few minutes left here as we keep going, and if you come up with something, you can throw it in as I ask. So going back to the business now, tell us about your goals over the next 5 years. If everything were to go the way you'd like to go, where would you like to see Tiny Diamond Homes going over the next 5 years?
You know, I would love, our major goal would be to teach. We would like to have a school that, let's say, someone without building experience, they would start the class with our empty trailer, and they would leave 6 weeks later with their house and know how to build every inch of it so that they know how to take care of it. We're losing, our goal right now is to pass the information on so it's not lost. And that means getting people's hands involved. To us, it's putting the cell phones down and getting the tools out and learning how to put things back together instead of just having them already made. But teaching every little step so that this builder or this homeowner knows how to maintain that house and make it last for generations.
That's great. And so, have you been able to do any teaching to this point of anything related to your tiny homes? Do you do? I think you have a meetup group, and have you done anything else that is somewhat related?
You know, we don't ever not teach. I think anybody who comes to see one of our models, I'm known to spend up to 4 or 5 hours with them explaining why everything is done the way it is. There is no end to teaching. It's so much fun. And down the road, we have done some meetups. Mostly what we're trying to do is get people to understand design first. There are lots of people who want to design their own floor plans. And what happens is instead of looking at the space they're living in, they're looking at what can they cram into that space. And they fail to measure things like toilets. I never knew the average toilet you need to have 28 inches from the wall to the end of the seat. And then you need to have another 4 inches for your knees. If you don't build the space for the body in the space besides the item, you're going to spend your whole life tripping over the furniture or tripping over the toilet to get to the shower, or you know, the washcloth is hanging where you would put your elbow to put your contacts in. It's the space and making it functional and livable.
Makes total sense. Well, I think we'll try to kind of move towards wrapping up here. I said before, while you were off, actually, I forgot my computer cord today, and I'm going to run out of power. Right now, it tells me that I'll run out right as we're sort of supposed to hit an hour, and I don't want to cut that too short here. So I'm going to kind of move towards wrapping down. Here's the last sort of personal question I'll ask, and it's kind of a fun one. I ask everybody this, so it's a little bit of a story. So let's pretend that you woke up this morning and you realized that you were not you weren't where you were when you went to bed. You were in a new place, and you wandered around a little bit and realized it was just kind of like Earth, and there were probably even some people there, and you talked to them, and you could communicate, but it wasn't Earth. You were in a new place, but it was an awful lot like it, and you kind of searched around, and you realized that you had $500 in your pockets. Your needs were taken care of. You'd already figured out that you had a bed, and there was food for yourself, so you didn't have to worry about that. What would you do over the next 7 days with the knowledge that you were in this new place, and you also sort of realized, I don't think I'm going back to where I was, and you had $500, and it kind of would go the same distance that it might go today here. What would you do over that 7 days?
You know, knowing myself, I would explore. I'd pack my little backpack and put the best kind of walking shoes I could, and I'd start walking. And as I met people along the way, if they needed something, I'd probably hand them part of my little $500 stash and invite them to walk too. And get to know people out there and get to know what's growing in the backyards and what fruit to eat, and enjoy the sunshine or the rain.
Very cool. So that's probably it for sort of the questions that I have. Now I'm going to just kind of turn it over to you, turn it to our audience also. If you guys have got any other questions, I've already handled a couple things, but Deb's still scrolling through lots of cool pictures that you have, so people are going to get to be able to see much of the home construction process and everything else here, which is very cool. Tell us whatever you'd like to say about your business, yourself. Just sort of wind this down, and how can people get a hold of you if they want to learn more about you and your business and tiny homes, and how they might buy one from you, and just wrap it up that way.
Okay. To reach us, we do have a contact page on our website that you can send that information, and I do return calls, and I also write every email personally to each person, which is gotten to be a little more time consuming than I originally. I've probably written 2,000 plus emails now. We also take phone calls, and we do answer the phone, where I try my best to answer the phone, and I'll get back to any questions within 24 hours. We like people to visit our model and spend time just sitting in the space. And if you're interested in building a tiny house, we definitely want to help you and do offer different stages of builds, and we do offer consulting services. We've been doing all that for free, but I have a feeling our time is getting a little bit to the point where it would still be very reasonable, put it that way.
Well, that is very cool. And your website is tinydiamondhomes.com. And
very correct. Yep.
And since you said you took phone calls, why don't you just give us your phone number real quick?
It's 720-243-8581.
All right. Well, we're a little bit early, but I think that we've covered a bunch of things. This has been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it. I wish I would have been able to kind of see you through the rest of this, but we'll certainly be getting together at some point. And it worked out all right. We ended up getting you back on a phone connection. So I hope you've enjoyed this. And like I said, we'll get a lot of people that will watch this in a replay, and I assume if we get some questions, we can pass them along to you. And again, for myself and for Deb and all the folks here, we thank you so much, Cheryl. And unless you have some another point you want to make or anything, again, thanks so much, and you just have an awesome day.
And I just want to say back to you, thank you for the invitation. I've enjoyed sharing with everyone out there that's been listening about tiny houses and just about life.
All right.
And thank you.
Well, thanks a lot, Cheryl. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.